Everybody, and welcome to this BIA Brexit briefing, the turn of the year 2017-2018 briefing. My name's Steve Bates. I'm the chief exec here, and I'll be doing the bulk of it. But the vast majority of this work has been done by the other voice you'll hear on this webinar, Laura Collister, who is our Brexit lead. So the agenda for today, with 464 days till Brexit Day, is an update on the negotiations, where we've got to, something on what's going on at the UK side, what's going on at the EU side, and some next steps from the BIA, and a chance for some questions at the end of the webinar. Do please type them in if you have any. And I think those of you who follow UK political cartoonists will see that we're obviously punting for Matt from the Telegraph for political cartoonist of the year 2018. I think he's really nailed some of the issues to do with Brexit. You'll see them as we go through. As you know, this is a regular standing item in the BIA calendar now, and last month we went through the EMA decision, negotiations and such like, and these are available on the BIA YouTube channel if you want to go back into the detail there. So there's much less this time round on regulatory detail. Last month was that was covered in more detail. So if I can, I'll move on to the negotiations update. These are the negotiations between the UK and the EU with regards to Brexit. In the last month, we've seen the final push towards the deal with Theresa May meeting President Juncker. Didn't quite work on the first occasion due to some concerns around the Irish border, but by the time of the General Affairs Council on the 8th of December, they'd published a report recommendation to the European Council that sufficient progress had been made, and this was endorsed at the European Council meeting on 15th of December, with guidance for the future of negotiations published, and that's the document here shown on the right. The General Affairs Council has been appointed by the European Commission as the people who will have the responsibility for Brexit. They're also the group that made the decision on the EMA location, you'll remember, and that's going to be an important body going forward. Some detail on the report covered citizens' rights, Ireland, financial settlement and other separations issues. Here's the link to the website if you're interested in it. And I think probably from a sector-specific area, the key one that I'm going to focus on from here is the goods on the market point. This was the single paragraph in the document about goods on the market, on ensuring continuity in the availability of goods placed on the market under union law before withdrawal. Both parties recognise the need to provide legal certainty and minimise disruption to business and consumers. Both parties have agreed the principles that goods placed on the market under union law before withdrawal may freely circulate on the markets of the UK and the Union with no need for product modifications or relabelling, be put into service where provided in union law, and that the goods concerned should be subject to continued oversight. So from our perspective, important that this was in, but I think the question is, fantastic legalistic speak, what does this actually mean? And we are seeking clarification from the UK government as to what does this actually mean. And from conversations we've had with members and with others, we understand that the EU and the European Medicines Agency consider the EU definition of goods on the market, which is referenceable in a document they published last year, as the legal basis that they worked to on this. As a result of that discussion, this is the reaction I put out on the fact a deal had been done. So we welcome the agreement. It's now crucial the UK and the EU agree a transition period to ensure supply of medicines isn't affected, and it should be a first priority for the next phase of talks. I did go into some thoughts around welcoming the greater certainty on some of the areas, citizens' rights, and then on goods on the market. I put my interpretation onto it here, which is that medicinal products that have been tested and released prior to the Brexit date be freely available in the EU, even if that testing and release is carried out in the UK and goods are shipped to other countries after the EU withdraws. I suppose that was my initial view a week or so ago. My sense now is that I think that is broadly the correct interpretation. It's my judgment of it, although perhaps now I would modify the last sentence to think about whether the importance is that the goods are warehoused in the EU before the Brexit date. I think that would be the subtlety that but I think we're continuing to seek clarity and clarification on this, both from the EU and the UK, and that'll be a key part of New Year's work for us. Here's the council meeting where they agreed the deal and able to move to the next line, next round. But I think what's interesting is that in the guidance for a transition, or an implementation period, a period post March 2019, they're going to talk about that in the new year with the UK, with the EU, but they make the argument that the proposal is that the UK as a third country will no longer participate in or nominate or elect members of the EU institutions, nor participate in the decision making of the union bodies, offices and agencies. So interesting, what does that mean for MHRA, EMA, continued cooperation? And we're trying to find out what this means in detail, and whether there is some constructive ambiguity that can be helpful here. So that's where that piece is from. I'm delighted that we're back to the slide you see here on the right hand side with regard to the moving to the second phase. You'll remember this is a schematic that the BBC drew up many times ago, and you can see that we're finally moving from the first row of phase one into phase two, but you can see that there's still a long period to phase two and phase three. So the idea that it's all done is certainly no way to proceed. There's still a long way to go. You could say we've had the end of the beginning, and now we have the next phase. So I think we'll see in the new year exactly how this is going to be conducted. Probably initially a discussion around implementation or transition phase, what that looks like, what's agreed for that, beginning in the first part of the year, and then perhaps some discussions around future end state by about March, perhaps with a further speech by the Prime Minister. The UK Prime Minister has tended to do speeches sort of outlining intent before each of the key stages, and I'd be unsurprised to see something early in the new year along those lines if we follow the previous model. And here's some key dates that are important. The October deal finalised is important because if you look at this phase two, you'll see that there then needs to be a ratification or an agreement by parliaments, both the European Parliament and the UK Parliament, and people think that may take about 6 months, which would give us the time before the deadline date of March 2019. So, what do we think is going to happen? This isn't factual reporting. This is my gut view as to what might be important and where might we get to. And on the first point, I've already changed my thinking today. I've said here, transition, expect a 2-year transition with the same rules. It's been made clear today from the European Commission that they see the end point of any such transition being December 2021. So a few months short of, December 2020, a few months short of the 2 years that the UK had initially suggested. So that seems to be where a transition may look to end up. Goods on the market, it's good to see that it's included. We're working towards the EU definition of the goods on the market, and we'll keep going on what the UK think of that. I'm not quite sure what this is going to mean for participation in agencies. Obviously, third countries do participate in EMA processes, not exactly in different ways, depending on the nature of the different deals. So we'll look and see how that works. And I'm still of the view that the stated timetable by the EMA at the behest of the Commission is undeliverable. They've got to move to Amsterdam. They've got to do all of the new authorizations. I think that's an incredibly onerous task, and my judgment is that I would be unsurprised to see things slip to the right, move in timelines or deadlines because of the practicalities of what's being asked. But I wouldn't expect anybody to say that publicly. And I hope what we can continue to do for you is make sure that we push on the need for progress to deliver more certainty, and we'll do that on the areas we think are most important. And I just reflect on this. I do believe that the work that's been done by BIA members, hopefully coordinated through the BIA and the ABPI, is making a difference and is making a real impact. We'll continue to do that as we go into this second stage. Moving now to a perspective of the UK, a little bit more on the UK politics of this. So for the first time on a Brexit bill, the UK government was defeated on an amendment calling for a meaningful vote on the final Brexit deal, and I think that that's indicative of the close nature of the hung parliament we have in the UK. It's interesting the government have withdrawn their own amendment to write the date of Brexit into the law. They've taken that out, I think, because they realise again they may be defeated on this. So it's pretty close, and I think Matt again has summed it up well, combining Christmas with Brexit. This week, somewhat surprisingly, I think to many of us, the UK government have formally sat down to have a discussion about what the future end state of the UK's relationship with the EU should be. And I think we can read in the press where people's predilections are with regard to that. Theresa May is in front of Parliament as we sit here now, talking to the chairs of the select committees, but she's also made an important speech to Parliament, which I think gives a clear sense as to where she wants to get to. Laura, I know that you had the opportunity this week to go to the Home Office as part of a round table, so perhaps I can hand over to you for talking about what you see the citizens' rights agenda having got to.
Yes, so since the agreement at the end of last week, there's further detail from the UK government around citizens' rights, so the rights of EU citizens to stay in the UK as well as those vice versa. UK government have actually done a few communications over the last week, and they will be doing more in the next few days. I think they're trying to issue a sort of a confidence letter, which companies are able to ask for, and which hopefully we will be able to circulate to BIA members who want it, around what the new system is going to look like. So from the Home Office, there was a roundtable around life sciences the other day. We obviously talked a lot around what the sector needs going forward and internationally, but one of the things that the Home Office wanted to talk about was the new system. So they made it very clear it's a new digital system. It will be operational from the end of next year, and it's going to be very much like a passport system, and will take a short time to fill in. So in terms of cost, the same, and in terms of filling in your form, it will be the same. They're going to target a decision within 2 weeks. The only issues of if you won't get it, it will be delayed around criminal convictions, and also if they think there might be fraudulent activity. So if you aren't a member, if you aren't from the EU. Obviously they've talked about the settled status, and there's confirmation from the Home Office that this will now happen. If EU citizens haven't been in the UK for 5 years, they can still apply and until they reach the 5-year threshold. And then they've also sort of included families and spouses within their communications, and they've been talking about the rights of healthcare, pensions and other benefits in the UK will remain the same. There's further detail on their EU citizens website, and we will also hopefully get the confirmation letter with more detail today or tomorrow from UK government, and we've asked to be able to circulate it to those members who would like it.
Thanks, Laura. I think it's really positive. We've sought engagement with the Home Office, and it's great to see that they're responding and sharing their position with us. I think this is one of the things that we've been calling for a period of time, and it's great to see opportunities to engage. We will share with members the latest and continue on this agenda next year. So one of the other things I've done in the last month is give evidence to the Health Select Committee. They are doing an inquiry into the impact Brexit poses for the full life science process from soup to nuts. Many leading organisations have been giving evidence, and My evidence focused on the need for public health to be considered first when phase 2 of the negotiation starts. But we also used the occasion to formally launch and place on the BIA website a new report compiled from members by OHE Consulting in partnership with the ABPI. And let me just, if I may, take you through some of the the headlines and detail behind it. So this is a document that's available on the OHE website, link here. I would encourage anybody who's got a deep interest in Brexit and life sciences to have a look at this. It's got publicly available information, survey information from member companies, and some information from the EMA. It looks at the different scenarios and gives a flavour of what might happen in Brexit. I'd say we've done 2 substantive documents since the referendum. One was the PwC report of last August, and I think this is the second, and so I'd give it a similar billing. So I haven't got time to go into all of the detail here. You can see the press releases on the BIA website, and here's the front page of the OHE report. But this gives some of the headlines. So, you know, basically, I suppose I'd sum it up as it's we're either going to have a win-win situation for both the UK and the EU with regard to future cooperation, or it's lose-lose for everybody. And this is about making the case for the importance of the MHRA within the EU system, particularly around some of the key safety stats, that there is significant challenges to supply if we have a very hard Brexit, and some detail behind here as to how the UK sits within the European distribution and supply chain, that this is a significant business by volume and value, that there are lots of things crossing across many borders within the EU that could be made more difficult in result of no deal or a very hard Brexit. So well worth a look. I shan't go through it in great detail today, but encourage you to put it on your reading list. I think from a BIA perspective, we're still working towards the policy priorities that we set out last August in the PwC work a while ago. Common regulatory framework with the EU, alignment of current future regulations, and participation in the European process, may be made somewhat more challenging by the most recent statements. The ability to trade and move goods and capital, and we're looking to make sure we can work in that space on the trade agenda. Access to the best talent. Laura's talked to the citizens' rights or the people issues and where we've got to on that, and making sure that we've got the opportunity to collaborate on science and make sure that we've got the requisite funding. Again, we're continuing to work on those, and I think that as a structure still holds for the move into 2018. Laura, perhaps you can give us a perspective of what's been going on in Brussels from an EU perspective.
So I think on previous webinars, we've talked about how we've aligned with our partner organisations across the EU to ensure some common messaging around our key points. So this week, there was a joint policy document published from those associations, which includes BIA, Europa Bio, as well as ABPI, FPIA, and other organisations. It's freely available and it's been widely circulated and was press released. I think what it shows is that we are very aligned. A lot of work went into drafting this document, but it still reflects the PwC priorities, which Steve's just run from the report we did, which Steve's just run through. So there's a strong body of evidence of policy asks coming out from European organisations to the EU audience, and then also into members of the country members of the European associations. The other EU issue I wanted to flag, so obviously we've done a survey with OHE and ABPI. FPIA, the European Trade Association, of which ABPI is a member, has also done its own survey, and that also found some very interesting stats. I think in particular the 45 million patient packs that come to the UK every month, and the 37 million patient packs that leave every month. That's also available, and the link is on their website.
Fantastic. Thank you, Laura. So as we speed towards Christmas, and I know you can hear the bells jingling in the background, although you can't see the Santa hat that I'm wearing. What will we be doing at the BIA? We'll continue to work with the government to provide clarification and communication on what the latest actually means. Apologies if it's not been absolutely clear, but we're doing our best to understand what are complex documents at the drop of a hat and provide you with the right bits to look at. And I hope you can help us by pointing us in the right direction or seeing if there's any things that you need for us to do. And then encouraging the government to do further public communication to provide greater certainty where possible for industry. And I think the work being done around people issues and citizens' rights is helpful and something we didn't have a month ago. So thank you very much for that. We'll continue to make sure that we're providing the UK government with expert input as the process develops. I think there's some work that we can do around future trade states and potentially trade deals around the world, which will be important in 2018. We're trying to make sure that we're engaging across parties to make sure, as Parliament becomes important and has its voice on this, to make sure that we have an understanding and agreement and support for some of the positions that we're advocating. It won't be too long before many select committees will be producing reports on the sector, and I think we need to make sure that that they're informed and engaged and aligned. Laura mentioned the importance of European alignment between the UK organisations and European organisations. We'll keep doing that in 2018 to make sure that there's a clear consistency and engagement with the European Council, Commission and Medicines Agency. And we'll work with others, including the Brexit Health Alliance, to make sure that that us as an industry are aligned with others in a broader health community. Our focus remains the same: regulation, trade, talent, research, and finance. And hopefully we will continue to inform you in effective ways around what's going on and where possible and where practicable, seeking your input into what may be a fast-moving, I expect to be a fast-moving 2018. So if you've walked out to get a cup of tea somewhere during that, I will give you a summary slide to think as to where we're at in closing. So negotiations have progressed to phase 2. But we still need clarification on what some of the phase 1 things mean, and it hasn't provided all the answers. Getting the Brexit stuff through the UK Parliament for the government is tough, and the Prime Minister suffered a defeat. We should expect these to be knife-edge decisions all the way along. There's a new document from us and the ABPI which has been published on impact to the sector, and our work, I believe, is landing. We'll continue to engage with the UK government, the EU and the broader environment. And for those of you who've been with us all the way through this series, I thought I'd close with my favourite TV show of the 80s, Dynasty. Here they are at Christmas. Obviously, one loving family. You see the Colbys and the Carringtons, not only looking fabulous, but arm in arm with some around the Christmas tree. Perhaps it's a metaphor for the Brexit negotiations as we see them now. As I've always said, Brexit will be as long-running as Dynasty. And this is only the end of Series 1. There's bound to be more. Stay tuned for more drama next year. So I think with that, I shall open it to questions and see if we have any. I have stunned you all into silence, which is either good or bad. I will wait a few seconds, see if anybody is furiously typing away. Quick question on the future partnership. Do you think it will be dealt with MRA, Mutual Recognition Agreement? I'm taking MRA. Sebastian, would it be a mutual recognition agreement? I'm guessing that you mean within the context of medicines regulation rather than the full Brexit agreement. So the answer is I don't know. I think that there are a range of options that are available. The UK side and the EU side, I believe, are well briefed about the benefits of continued close cooperation, the formats under which close cooperation could be envisaged depend on a broader discussion, of which mutual recognition is one possibility. I think that there may well be a different case for the transition stroke implementation period to the end state period, but I'm afraid until we get greater clarity, I can't speculate effectively. Happy to speculate, of course, but as to where that will end up. Are we still considering soft or hard Brexit in terms of the pharmaceutical industry? Well, I think we are. We follow the debate in the papers, both the European papers and the UK papers, as to the range that is viewed by the Cabinet as to what the future state could be. You'll see that we saw that the Cabinet only met to have this discussion about their desired future end state at the beginning of the week. And broadly, you pay your money and you take your choice as to where the Cabinet will come out to on that. I think it's clear that the statements of the Prime Minister, no customs union, no longer part of the single market, would mean that from our perspective on the original analysis that we've done, the UK seems to be heading towards a harder Brexit than softer Brexit. But we are not there yet, and we've seen some significant movement on some of the things that were considered to be red lines in the negotiation, and the how you square the circle of the Irish border is still remains to be seen. So you're all firing them in now. I shall keep going. When do you think an extended transition period will be confirmed? When will we get to know if we get more time and what that means? Good question. My judgment is that they are trying to get a transition period deal done by the end of March. So I think we will see some. I think the expectation is that they will want to talk about transition period, implementation period, first 3 months of the year, then spend 6 months doing a discussion about what the future end state may be. So perhaps the 22nd, 23rd of March, Laura advises me, is the European Council meeting. That's when I would guess that they'll be aiming towards for that. I think that there is a slight wrinkle with this, which is that we may get a political statement of intent there, which is not the same, I'm told, as a legal basis for operation. And that's something that we'll be working on in the next couple of months. You just mentioned mutual recognition agreements. Surely there will be delays any which way you look at it, X days and Y months after the CHMP decision for centralised procedures, which companies would prioritise over UK access. I think that this question, the answer to this question is it depends. It is possible that we may have a new or separate process in the UK. In that case, it may be possible that that processes could run in parallel rather than in series, and if they run in parallel, some of the UK processes need not have the clock stop and broad consensus building pieces that the EU process does at present. So technically, it may be possible for the UK to run a process that is less impactful in terms of delays. But I agree that anything that duplicates processes and means that companies have got to do two things makes it harder for companies. And I've never been of the view that they would run them concurrently. Sorry, long answer to a short question. The MHRA looks confident to keep the close collaboration very close to what it is today. Any idea why it's so confident? Well, I think that one of the reasons why they can be confident is that they have a substantive case. If you look in detail at the OHE report, it's clear that the UK brings quite a lot to the European discussion around medicine safety, and I think that the scientific clout and the scientific clout is also about judgment on the evidence that is put before experts at the MHRA, would be a loss to Europe. So perhaps their confidence is based on their scientific heritage. I would agree that at the moment the mood music, which we must remember is in part a negotiation tactic from the EU 27 and particularly from the European Council, is probably less confident of a very close alignment. Does the Canada plus statement conflict with the statement over Northern Ireland? I think perhaps, Colin, you're being enthusiastic about the Canada plus view. I saw a Canada plus statement, but maybe you saw one that had an additional level of plusness to it, David Davis, that I missed. Yes, you're right that there are. It is, I suppose, one of the things that people say about negotiations is sometimes constructive ambiguity is useful. I think you pick on 2 points here, where if you go for a free trade agreement with no customs and no no customs union and no single market, how do you maintain frictionless trade across the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, is one that I think has been perhaps kicked down the track to a future discussion rather than resolved with immense clarity. And I'm unsurprised that there's been a fudge to keep things moving to phase 2, because I think that's what was in there. Any insight when the MHRA will communicate on guidance transferring the licenses? Don't know. They haven't given me a date for that. So we are ensuring and encouraging our colleagues and friends at the MHRA to ensure that they communicate as they are able with guidance. It's unfortunate that they've not been able to provide as much Q&A as we've seen from the EMA, but we're keen to make sure that that people have clarity in which to operate, and I'll pass your concerns on. Is it likely we could be a Norway or Iceland and sit on the CHMP? Well, that's certainly one possibility. As you know, we maintain all of the options, I believe, are still up for grabs. I think this is one that will be open for negotiation going forward. I'm sorry if I've not been able to give you exact clarity on all of those things, but I hope I've given you at least the current thinking that that we've got. I thank you for staying with us late into the afternoon on this day before, a couple of days before Christmas. I'm going to move on with a couple of final points. We are running some briefing seminars for BIA members looking at trade and research collaboration and finance issues in February. These are listed below, and you can sign up for them on the BIA website. Do come along if you're interested in the trade issues. I think there's quite a lot to be discussed there. And just a selection of BIA events into the new year. I'd highlight, if you are interested in getting to know the sector very well, the BIA Gala Dinner at the Brewery in London on the last Thursday of January 25th is a great evening. Over 600 people will be there, and if you picked one thing to do with the BIA next year, I'd encourage you to make it that one. But you may also be interested in the Brexit Briefing webinars, the seminars I've just outlined, or if you're a Chief Medical Officer, a new highlight, Chief Medical Officer Summit in London on the 5th of March. If you like what you hear or you're interested in getting